beginner jazz pianist, but you're not sure what you should be practicing each day? Well, this is one of the most frustrating experiences for piano students, and it can oftentimes leave you stagnant in your playing. So in today's lesson, I'm going to show you the 5 things that you should be practicing each day, and I'm going to show you my exact lesson plan that I give to my piano students so that you know exactly what to practice, how long to practice it, and when you're ready to move on to the next step. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so the 5 things that you should be practicing each day are technique, harmony, scales, lead sheets, and improvisation. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these and show you exactly what to practice. But before we do this, if you're enjoying the video, please hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. All right, pillar number 1 is technique, and there's a great exercise that I recommend that you play each day, and it goes like this. This is an excellent exercise because it will help you master the most important chords in jazz called diatonic 7th chords. And I'm going to explain these in just a minute. And then in the right hand, this will help you master your finger speed, strength, and control. So how does this exercise work? Well, it's actually very simple. Starting with the left hand, we're going to play these chords called diatonic 7th chords. And they're basically all of the 7th chords that come from a key. And it's actually quite simple to play. We start on the C, we skip a note, play the E, skip a note, play the G, and skip a note and play the B. And this creates a beautiful chord called a C major 7 chord. Now here's the trick. You're going to take this chord and you're going to move it up to the D and do the same thing. And now you have what's called a D minor 7 chord. And so you want to do this on every note from the scale. Play it on the E, the F, the G, the A, and the B. Now on the right hand, we're going to start on middle C and we're going to play 4 notes up, 1 and 2 and then once we get to the G, we're going to play 4 notes down, but here's the trick. On the 5th note, we want to land on the D, okay? So we have 1, 2, 3. We need a 4th note before we land on the D. So we're going to use a chromatic note. We're going to put this E flat in there, and that way we can land on the D on beat 1. Okay, so here's how it goes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, and now we can land on D and do the same thing. So we come up again, this time on D, 1 and 2 and, we come down from A, 3 and 4 and, we need one more note so that we can land on the E on the downbeat. So what do? We go 3 and 4, we throw a little chromatic note in, the G flat, and 1. And now we can land on the E on the next measure, okay? And so we're going to follow this pattern coming up and down, but we add a chromatic note just before the note that we're targeting. In this case, it's F. And we continue the pattern, this time A flat to G. And then now we're going to go B flat to A. For this one, we're going to use a D flat to get to the B. You sing the pattern, and then for this one we go D flat, and then we land on the C. So when you put the hands together, it goes like this. Now we go to D. Now the E. Now the F. Now the G. To A. Now the B, and you can do a little hold on the C. Now you can play this exercise down the piano as well, and the way that you do this is you start on your C chord, we're going to start on the G, and we're going to come down. We're going to use a chromatic note E flat, and now we can start on our F. Does that make sense? And then chromatic note E flat or D sharp, makes sense? And then C sharp to D, and then we're going to go B flat to B, and then C, chromatic note, and then G sharp to A, and then we come down on G from the G flat, and we can hold there. Now for a tempo goal, I've put a tempo in here at 90 to 200 beats per minute. So 90 would be kind of the slowest and 200 would be kind of the fastest. Now once you can play this exercise comfortably at about 140 BPM, then you're ready to move on to another key, or you can continue playing this in the key of C to develop some finger speed. If you'd like to move on to a new key, then I recommend that you play the keys in this order. So you'll start in the key of C as you just played, and then do the key of F, G, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B, E, A, and D. And the reason that I recommend them in this order is because these are the most common keys that you'll see when you're playing jazz. By the way, if you want to do a deep dive and learn all of your diatonic seventh chords, plus exercises to master them in all of your keys, check out our diatonic seventh chords course. I'll put a link to that below. Now you might be wondering, Johnny, how much time should I spend on each one of these pillars? And what I recommend is that you divide your practice time evenly among the 5 pillars. So if you have 30 minutes to practice and you have 5 different pillars to practice, then I recommend you spend 6 minutes on each pillar. And if you have an hour to practice, then I recommend that you spend 12 minutes on each pillar. And if you had 2 hours to practice, then I recommend you spend 24 minutes on each pillar. All right, pillar number 2 is harmony, and there are basically 5 essential chords that you need to know if you want to play jazz piano. So let's do a quick review of these chords, and then I'll show you exactly how to practice them. The first chord you need to know if you want to play jazz is called a major 7 chord. It's like a C major triad, and the 7th is just a half step below the root. The second chord you need to know is called a dominant 7 chord, and it's a major triad, except the 7th is a whole step below the root. The third chord you need to know is called a minor 7 chord, and it's a minor triad, C minor, and the 7th is a whole step below the root. The fourth chord you need to know is called a half diminished chord, and it's kind of like a minor chord except you lower the 5th, and then the 7th is a whole step below the root, and then the 5th chord that you need to know is called a diminished chord, and it's basically like a half diminished chord except we take that 7th and we lower it 1 more. So what I recommend is that you pick one of these chords, like the C major 7 chord, and you spend 1 week or maybe 2 weeks mastering this chord. The way that I recommend doing this is by starting on your first chord, C major 7, and playing all of your inversions. So the next inversion, we put the E on the bottom, and then we put the C on the top, right? And then we do the next inversion, we play the same chord, but this time we put the E on the top, and then we go up once more, and this time we put the G on the top, all right? Then you can come down, and for this one, I like to come back up to my first chord and then bring them all down. So now we put the B on the bottom, the G on the bottom, the E on the bottom, and the C on the bottom. Now these are called block chords because we're playing all the notes at the same time, but you can also play these chords broken. So for this one, I'm just taking each chord and I'm breaking up all of the notes, coming up to each new inversion, and we use the same fingering that we played before, okay? And if you want to come down, I would actually take it from this position and then come down to each inversion. You can also make up your own pattern. For example, I could take that C major 7 chord and I could go bottom, next one up, skip the G, up to the B, and down to the G. Okay? And then do that pattern on the next inversion. So E, G, skip the B, and go C, B. You see the pattern? And then the next one. And if you wanted to do this down the piano, you'd start on the G, skip the C, and go B, C. And then do this in the next inversion. E, C, skip the B, G, B, right? C, B, E, G, B, G, C, E. Now, a great tempo goal is between 40 and 70 BPM. 40 would be a little on the slower side, and 70 would be on the high side. Now, after 5 weeks, you should have mastered playing all 5 of your chord types and all of the inversions associated with those chords. So once you've done that, then for the next 5 weeks, focus on a new key. And once again, I recommend the order of keys that I told you earlier, so you could go to the key of F and then play all of your chords in the key of F. By the way, I wanted to mention that the lesson sheet music you're seeing up here on the top left of the screen is downloadable and printable over at pianowithjonny.com. You can also change the key of this entire lesson with a click of one button with our smart sheet music. So I'll put a link to all of that below. All right, the third thing that you should be practicing each day is scales. And scales are important in jazz for 3 reasons. First, scales will help you with your technique. Second, scales are oftentimes what you'll use when you're improvising a solo playing jazz. And third, scales are the building blocks of jazz chords. So when you learn your scales, you're also learning how to form chords at the same time. So how do you actually practice your scales? Well, many teachers would say if you want to practice C major scale, you play the scale up the piano like this. But this is not the best way to practice scales if you want to learn jazz. The better way to practice your scales is to learn them by starting on each note from the scale. So here's what I mean. If I wanted to practice the C scale as a jazz musician, I would first play it on C, but then I would play it on D, and then I would do it on E. Okay? These are called modes, and basically a mode is when you play a major scale like C, but you start on a different note of the scale. So if I play a C major scale starting on the D, we call this D Dorian. And if I play it on the E, it's called E Phrygian, and F Lydian, and G Mixolydian, and A Aeolian, and B Locrian. Now don't let these terms scare you. They're basically the C major scale starting on different notes, but this is a very important concept to understand if you want to play jazz. So how do you actually practice your scales? Well, I would start on your C major scale and first play the scale hands together, starting on C. Now, quick note on the fingering. If you don't know your C major scale, right hand 1, 2, 3, cross the thumb under to F, and then we finish the scale. Okay? Left hand, finger 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we cross the third finger over and we finish the scale. Now you're going to use this fingering no matter where you start on the scale. Okay? So after you do C, then play the same scale starting on D. Same fingering. Thumb under, left hand third finger over, and we end on D. Then we do it on the E. Right? And then the F, the G. Makes sense? And you're going to do this all the way up the piano until you get to the B, and then you can finish on the C like that. And so what this is doing is it's not only teaching you your C major scale, but it's helping you master your modes. And modes are typically what we use when we're improvising a solo in jazz. Now in terms of speed, I recommend that you play this exercise between 50 and 100 beats per minute, 50 being on the slower side and 100 being on the faster side. And after you can play this exercise comfortably at about 80 beats per minute, then you're ready to move on to a new key. And so I would move on to the key of F major and play your F scale, starting on each note from the scale. By the way, if you want to learn more about modes, you can in our mode courses like our Dorian, Lydian, and Mixolydian courses. I'll put links to those below. All right, pillar number 4 is the most fun thing to practice because this is playing lead sheets. And lead sheets are basically jazz tunes. And this is really kind of the hallmark of playing jazz. You want to actually be able to play songs and improvise over them. So we're going to use an original tune as an example. This is Fly On By, and it's a little tip of the hat to the classic jazz tune Fly Me to the Moon, and it goes like this. So how was I able to take this basic lead sheet with the melody and chords and make it sound so cool and jazzy? Well, there are basically 2 steps. First, you want to play chord shells in your left hand. And when you're going through these chords in jazz, you're going to see a lot of minor 7 chords and G7 and C major 7 chords. And if you go through each chord and you figure out the notes, they're kind of big 4-note chords. But if you're a beginner jazz student, I don't recommend that you play the full chord. In fact, if you just play 2 notes from the chord in your left hand, it sounds great. And these are called chord shells. So as a quick example, our first chord is A minor 7. And so instead of playing the full A minor 7 chord, all you have to play is the root and the third. And that's our chord shell. It's a partial chord. Now our next chord is D minor 7. Well, guess what? For this chord, all you have to play is the root and the 7th. And it's really close by to the first chord. So here's the rule with chord shells. Chord shells are either the root and the third of the chord or the root and the 7th of the chord. This is typically how we play it in the left hand. And so you can go through all the chords and play root third, root 7, then on the G7, root third, right? It's so close. C major 7, root 7. F major 7, root third. See how close by these chords are? Your B chord, B minor 7 with the flat 5, and then the E7 will be right here, finally to our A minor 7, like this. Now in the right hand, you could just play the simple melody, but it's really nice to harmonize the melody. And so I use a very simple trick where I add one harmony note to my melody note, but I use a note that's missing from my left hand. And so as an example, on the first chord, A minor 7, there's my melody note. I can add the G in, which comes from our A minor 7 chord. So now it's going to sound like this. A little more full, right? On the D minor 7 chord, there's my melody. What's a missing note? The 5th, the A, right? Sounds a little more full. Then on the G7 chord, right, there's the melody. What's a missing note I can add? Let's put the 7th in there. Doesn't that sound great? It's a very simple tool to harmonizing your melody, and it's not very hard to play. Okay, there's our C major 7 chord. I'm adding the G as a harmony. F major 7, I'm going to add the 7th as a harmony. B minor 7 flat 5. Let's add the F, that's our flat 5, really beautiful note. And then the E7, let's put the 7th in there. Just makes it a little more full, and then on the final chord, you can add the E, the 5th. Now, I recommend that you work on one song about every 2 weeks. If you have more time to practice, you might be able to play one song every week, and if you have less time to practice, you could work on one song per month. By the way, I want to mention some really great courses that will help you play lead sheets. First is our chord shell course that will help you master all of your chord shells. Second is our play lead sheets with 7th chords course. We also have a play lead sheets with chord shells course. And then we have 2 really great courses that will teach you classic jazz tunes. The first is our Fly Me to the Moon course, and then our Autumn Leaves course. In both of those courses, you'll learn how to play those classic jazz tunes and develop your left hand and solo over those tunes, so I'll put a link to all of that below. All right, the 5th thing that you should be practicing every single day is improvisation. And I want to show you what it would sound like to improvise a little solo over Fly On By. Check it out. And believe it or not, when I was just improvising, I was using one scale the entire time. So how did I do this? Well, first you want to figure out what key you're in. So look at your lead sheet, and there's basically 3 little tricks to find out the key that you're in. The first is to look at your key signature. And for this tune, the key signature is the key of C major because there are no sharps or flats. So that's a good indicator that we're in the key of C. But if you're still unsure of the key that you're in, you can look at the melody. And if you look at the melody for this tune, almost all of the notes use notes from the C major scale. So that's another sign we're in the key of C. And third, you can look at the chords. And if you look at the chords from this tune, A minor 7, D minor 7, G dominant 7, most of these chords use white notes. And so this really is a strong indicator that we're in the key of C major. All right, once you've determined your key, then you can use that scale that I was improvising with. And the name of the scale is called the major blues scale. I also call it the gospel scale. And it is an incredibly simple scale. It is only 6 notes. So here are the notes. In the key of C, we start on C. We go D. We go D sharp, thumb under to E, G, and A. It is that simple. It's only a 6-note scale, but it sounds amazing over all of these chords. So I want to show you a quick little sample solo that uses the major blues scale over all of the chords on Fly On By, and we're going to play this with one of the included backing tracks. By the way, this lesson comes with 4 downloadable backing tracks at different tempos, so I'll put a link to that below, and let's go ahead and play it. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the lesson, please let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels where you'll learn your favorite songs, styles, and how to improvise at the piano. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.